Hi and welcome to School Shorts with me, Melissa Chan Green, journalist and mum of two with a passion for education. And this is a topic I have wanted to have a conversation about for a long time. The highs and lows of a family's experience with dyslexia. Releasing this in Dyslexia Awareness Month seems like the perfect time. While there are lots of common threads in a family's experience with dyslexia, obviously every family also has different experiences. So I hope that this is just the start of a conversation that extends well beyond this month. So joining me for this conversation is Carla McNeil from Learning Matters and Casey Simson from Willow Park School. Thank you both for being with me.
Thanks for having us, Mel.
I say your professional work, but also your most important role is perhaps as a mum, both of you. And that's where I'd just like to start in terms of your personal experience. And Carla, if I can start with you, you've spoken about this a little on School Shorts before, but I feel like it really resonated with people, and so I'd love to hear a bit more from you on this. When was the first time that you saw signs of dyslexia in your?
It's a great question, Mel, and one that I was thinking about, knowing that what I know now I didn't know then, in terms of what to look for. And the signs that I first saw that I think will be most obvious and most relatable to parents are the fact that my eldest son didn't learn to read as I expected him to learn to read. So the real first sign was a really vivid memory of us sitting together on the couch, and he had a predictable home reader brought home, and he was unable to read a couple of words on one page. I told him those words. At that point in time, I didn't know how the brain learnt to read. I did just think he would pick up reading. I told him, and then we got to the next page and he didn't remember what that word was. And so for me, really, the first initial signs were around his immense struggle with learning to read, the prolonged struggle of learning to read, his inability to write, his inability to spell correctly, and his obvious lack of engagement and not for lack of persistence or resilience, really, but just his lack of engagement in anything to do with text. He really quickly withdrew from engaging and trying to write, to read. It was really, really, I'm going to say, impossible.
From a really early age?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So are you saying that because you have a lot of experience in this field now, but are you saying that that those were the first signs you saw at the time, but actually looking back, there may have been earlier signs you now know?
Yeah.
Right.
One early sign that I now know was when he was at kindy, he drew what looked like to scale drawing of how he wanted the playground designed. And at the time, I just thought, oh my goodness, you clever little guy. I was so proud of him. And I remember thinking, oh, he's just going to go to school and it's going to be a dream. So we saw these real pockets of promise in his ability to engage with thinking and to be really somewhat passionate himself about sharing what he knew and could do. But when it came to the printed word, we didn't see the same approach or ability with his own, capabilities to learn to read and to learn to spell and to express himself through writing.
I'll come back to that later, because that's something that is quite interesting in terms of that big picture thinking among people with dyslexia. But as you say, that the picture and the ideas were there, but not the relationship with text. Casey, can you just explain the first signs that you saw, and if there's any kind of similarities you're hearing with Carla's experience?
There definitely are, and some of the early signs when my daughter was in early childhood, there were certain things of nursery rhymes and rhyming words seemed to be complex. When we started at school, and my daughter is very articulate, She can pick up topics and themes and recite that. She is an incredible storyteller, and she doesn't let the truth get in the way of a really good story and can clearly communicate and pick up new concepts. So we thought actually when she starts school, she's just going to, again, hit the ground running. And we have been blessed in the sense that she hasn't been taught in a balanced approach. She has come into a school that has had structured literacy from the get-go. So she's been explicitly taught in a systematic way. But
we'll
she would
get into why that is important too for learners with dyslexia. I'll let you continue too, Casey, but can I just go back to when you were saying that she kind of didn't identify with the rhyming words or the nursery rhymes? What do you mean by that?
So we would be singing nursery rhymes and she'd be able to sing along and she would remember those as well. And then we would play games of what else rhymes with Matt? And she would go, but hat, Matt and hat. Can you hear those sounds? There would be a disconnect between being able to, even when we were playing with words orally, to be able to hear some of those key sounds.
Right, yeah.
So there were things like that had happened. And then when we started in at school and she would be learning sounds and I would be helping at home and we would practice again the next day. And it was like she's never seen these words before or these sounds before. And then we would be hit that again the next day. And then again the next day. She worked so hard and would work double the amount, and yet the progress was half the amount of her peers.
Right.
And so they got to this point where even she was going at the age of 5, why am I not? How is this so much harder? And so early on, she could recognize that kids were picking these up and it just wasn't popping for her.
Was it immediately clear to you that she may have dyslexia at that point, or was it just, you saw this in her learning, but you didn't connect it with dyslexia at the time?
We have dyslexia in our family, so it was always something that we were well aware of and also something that we were looking out for. And because I'm in education, early identification is one of the most critical aspects.
Yeah.
So when we were identifying things like the rhyming not working and starting off at school, and even small things of recognizing her name and how many hits that took for her to be able to recognize, we could see some of those signs early on and going, okay, we're going to need some support to make sure that she's set up for success.
You're both in education and both worked in the classroom or currently do still. Interested in your thoughts on whether this is something that is always caught at an early stage, and not to put blame on teachers, but just so that parents are aware what level of understanding there is in the profession. Carla?
No, it's not caught at an early stage. I think we have to be honest about that. We've got a lot of work to do to support all teachers to build their understanding, and the implementation of evidence-based literacy practices like a structured literacy approach is going a long way, or will go a long way to supporting that.
Is that because of the way that you teach in a sequence, that you are far more clear on how a child is progressing? Is that why it's...
Yep, that's one reason. And the other reason too, Mel, is that fundamentally a structured literacy approach, if we think about the International Dyslexia Association, which is a really great source for all teachers and for all parents to be building their knowledge, but fundamentally that approach was born from the science of reading findings, and it's a teaching approach that aligns with what we now know from the science of how all brains learn to read. So if we are teaching that way in our universal instruction in classrooms and all teachers are equipped to teach that way, they are so much more likely to detect really early whether or not a student is making the progress they should. One thing that is often missed in this conversation is that even when we implement a structured literacy approach, our children who are dyslexic, and remember dyslexia occurs on a spectrum from mild to very severe, that some of those students may still not make the same rate of progress as what others do.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that we change our implementation of how we're teaching or our approach to that because it aligns with science. What it means is that dosage is really important. We need to up the dose, and
in terms of how the way that they're learning more of it.
Give them more opportunity for repetition. So when Casey was saying about her daughter and, she wasn't picking it up, if she has more opportunities for repetition, if she is taught more frequently, she will get there. The research is very clear on that. So, if we as a nation implement across the year levels quality evidence-based literacy instruction that aligns with what the research says about how the brain learns to read, our teachers will be supported with the knowledge and the practice and then the tools they deserve to actually equip them to be able to support every learner that they sit across from, and that will encapsulate our dyslexic children.
Casey, ask you the same question. Do you think teachers are equipped currently or are in a position where that they can really clearly identify this early on?
I'll talk from my school perspective. I think we have been blessed to be on the structured literacy journey for multiple years now. And so we have systems in place to be able to identify early. We also have consistent practice across our school. So early identification is just part of what we do. We're able to be strong in what our scope and sequence is, and then be able to identify actually who's not making that expected progress, and then going, what are we going to do about it now? And that does look at different for, is this a tier 2, tier 3 instruction? What else do we need to be able to do? How do we work in partnership with families as well? And
the tiers there are in terms of the level or the other kinds of support that they need. That's the way you kind of are able to identify levels of support in the classroom. That's what you're referring to there, right?
Absolutely. Because some kids actually teaching and learning in that first hit works. Great classroom teaching, they're going to get what they need and they're going to thrive under that. And for children like my daughter, that's not enough. She needs extra hits and sometimes more explicitly taught in a smaller group or one-on-one to be able to get to where she needs to get. And that's as a parent, a hard place to be, knowing that for her, she's going to need those consistent hits. It's not something that she is going to get at the end of our primary school and go, got it. Actually, this is going to be a journey for us, for her and us as a family, to make sure that we put the right supports in place for her to be able to feel successful and connected and be able to do what she wants to do in the future with the confidence going through it.
I think now there's some pieces in what Casey is saying that are really important for parents to be acutely aware of. The first one is that obviously we have a new curriculum. And in terms of monitoring progress and reporting progress to our various stakeholders, but namely our whānau communities, we now have really clear expectations in our curriculum that stipulate what we hope or, expect children to be hitting in terms of targets for reading instruction and for spelling instruction and for writing instruction. So when we think about parents being part of the conversation and to support parents to know how to have those conversations, we really want parents to ask where their children really are achieving in relation to those curriculum expectations. But the other thing there that is really fundamentally important for parents to understand also in terms of what you were saying, Casey, is that there's a secret sauce that's been bottled internationally, and we need to make this secret sauce not a secret sauce any longer. We need it to be used like tomato sauce.
On everything.
On everything. And that secret sauce that we want to make as tomato sauce is that our instruction should be aligned from through the tiers of instruction that Casey was referring to. So our universal everyday classroom instruction that should follow evidence-based literacy practices, being a structured literacy approach, must be the same as what happens in Tier 2 small group instruction, and must be the same as what happens in our more intensive, kind of 1-2 or 1-1 Tier 3 instruction.
So you're saying every student must be taught in the same way. Consistency is important.
The key word is alignment. Right. So what has historically happened in our country and many other countries across the world is we've had one teaching approach in our classrooms, and then we've had a different intervention approach when children are taken into private intervention or intervention in a classroom setting.
Right.
Our work here in New Zealand in this space now is to create alignment between the tiers of instruction. And that is so important because earlier we were talking about repetition, we were talking about dosage, we didn't yet use the words intensity, but actually those children who are dyslexic, our children, and would, my son didn't experience this, but Casey's daughter will, what he or she is receiving in their Tier 3 intensive instruction must be a steroid version of what is going on in the classroom.
Right.
And that classroom teacher needs to know about that Tier 3 instruction, and the Tier 3 specialist literacy teacher needs to know what's happening in the classroom.
Yeah. So for parents going, oh my goodness, what do these tiers mean?
Yeah.
They will the main thing they need to know is if your child is getting extra tuition, if they are getting extra support at school, if they are identified as needing additional support other than what's happening in the classroom, it is crucial to find out that everybody is
100%. Get those people around the table.
Teaching in the same way.
Don't be afraid to build a little community of those people who work with your child. And the biggest thing in my experience is that we learn to advocate well for our children. And, when I started out in this journey, even though I was an educator in a classroom at the time, I went in guns blazing. I wouldn't recommend that approach.
What do you mean to the school? Like you went in and said, what's going on?
I went in guns blazing and sort of said, okay, well, so what are we going to do about this? Let's come up with a solution. And it didn't go down well. I have learnt an awful lot from that experience, and at all the transitions, primary to, my son went to a full primary school, but then into secondary, same. We have to learn to sit to the table and lean into being able to ask the right questions to ensure that our children receive the instruction they deserve.
Yeah.
And the instruction that is evidence-based.
Casey, when you have families who are identified as having children with dyslexia and needing extra support at school, what is that like in terms of the emotional journey for that child and for that family? And what would, your advice be around how important it is to to have those discussions about what's actually going to be happening for that child?
I think for parents, it can be very different for each parent. And also, as parents, we all bring our own personal baggage and our personal experiences from school as well. So how parents take this can be a really big journey for them as well. Because if learning was really easy for you, actually home learning at home is frustrating. Why are they not getting it? Like, I'm telling you, I'm showing you, and it's not happening.
And this was not my experience, so why is this happening for you?
Or it's, you were a struggling learner and you know that experience and you have that baggage on your shoulders and that empathy is there. That also comes in a different way. I think, especially now with the journey that we have been on as a school, for parents to be able to have those conversations when their children are 5 versus us going, hold on, at 8 or 9, the conversations are very, very different. It's okay, they're 5. We can now put things in place. We know that, yes, this is going to be a journey, but we also know what to do. And we know not to panic. For my daughter, is she where her peers are? No, she's not. Are we thinking she's going to be at the end of primary? No, she's not. But what we do know is she is progressing, and she's progressing very well because we have those systems in place. So it's us as parents going, what is the expected spot she should be at? That's not where she is. This is her expected, and this is the expected progress to get to where it is. And so there's not that disappointment. It's around, we have high expectations for our girl. It's just that journey is a little bit different from her peers.
Because that's the hard thing, right, is when you do have a child that perhaps they've got to 7 or 8, or they've got to a point where they're failing before the intervention begins. That's hard for both the child but also the parents, who then find out at a later point that maybe there was something they could have done earlier.
There's an opportunity cost with everything that we do, right? So we all have a responsibility to stop and do our research. And I agree with what you were saying about, parents' different experience, Casey, but more so actually that they might present or have different emotional experiences depending on where their child is sitting in terms of their sort of educational pathway. If they're 5, my own experience was my son was older. He was 10 fundamentally, or, when he was actually officially diagnosed with dyslexia. So I'd had 5 years of pent up concern, frustration, angst. I'm a teacher. How come I can't help him? It was just the most horrific feeling that I couldn't. I just felt so disempowered and really, fundamentally not good enough. And what I was more inclined to do with all of that pent-up frustration and huge sadness for him was go from, I was aware there was a problem, straight to a solution. I was the parent who went from awareness to action. And one of the big pieces of advice, Mel, that I would give to parents is to think about this little advocacy cycle that we have. And that is that when we are aware something is not right, trust your gut as a parent. Hand on heart, you know your child better than anybody else. You are the only one that is going to be with them when they open their results or get the email in year 11, year 12, year 13. You are the person. So if you are aware that something is not as you thought it might be, then your next step is to go to understanding. How do I build my understanding of what is going on for my child? What do I know about them? What do I know about their literacy capability? What is the information I'm getting from the school? Is it worthy of us investigating a more comprehensive assessment with an educational psychologist or a C-grade assessor? Do that. Please don't let anybody tell you it is not worth having that assessment.
Right.
And that is crucial because building understanding is the pivotal step in developing empathy. It is really hard to have empathy for ourselves as a parent, for our children, and know what they're experiencing if we haven't worked hard in that empathy, in the understanding step of the advocacy cycle. So we're aware, we then really sit and be comfortable to sit in that place of building understanding and engaging all stakeholders. Only then will empathy come. And at that empathy stage, we want to sit with the classroom teacher. We want to help understand their experience in the space as well. Humility must sit at the core of working in the space of supporting our children with dyslexia. And then and only then, when we have empathy, can we sit and have the conversation around what action we'll take.
Yeah.
And because then that action will be informed by the diagnostic information from how our child is presenting, be it with a dyslexic profile, be it with many forms of neurodiversity. Dyslexia is a magnet for other forms of neurodiversity.
Right.
Very rarely do we see just dyslexia present in isolation.
Yeah.
And so we as parents need to be aware of that, and we need to then use that as a vehicle to be open-minded to explore, are there other forms of neurodiversity present that will make this more difficult, and we buckle in for the ride.
Yeah. And it's not just for the child, it's for the whole family, right? Because once you start realizing, well, if my child is experiencing this, that means there is likely someone else in the family too.
Yeah. So it's complex, and in my experience, and I think you would probably agree with this, Casey, that my biggest reflection myself on a personal level is just slow down, Carla. Slow down and think about how you do this in a way that takes people with me, that is empowering for others, that I position myself as a parent, as a learner, and that ultimately my child, other children are going to benefit as a result. Because there's a lot of work to do across the education sector, and we can't just say that, we can't be grumpy to the teachers. We can't blame anybody. That's going to get us nowhere. We have to think about how we do this in a way that's going to create a much more evidence-based education system for everyone.
And it was interesting going back to what you were saying about that reporting, because, of the results and what's happening in the classroom, because often we hear, reporting, it's just going to kind of create a list, or I guess putting students into groups of where they're performing and what impact is that going to have on their self-esteem. But actually, if we're not collecting that evidence, Casey, how, it's such an important indicator early on of how they're doing, right? Is that what you're seeing in your school?
Absolutely. And it's not always about that moment in time. It's about the progress being made between. And so when we have interventions in place, some interventions, it doesn't mean that we're going to need that forever. Progress being made, those points in time give us an indication of what they can do and what those next steps are, but are they making that expected progress? And if they're not, what now do we need to do? How are we going to do some extra hits in this? How are we going to expose more times to be able to get that progress that we're expecting to be able to see?
We have to think of it kind of like the blood test we do. like we go to the doctor and we go for a blood test. That's what you're describing, right, in an education sense. And so whilst it's really daunting for us as a parent to get that what feels like a kind of kick in the guts, like, oh, my child's not there. And let's face it, you go and have a wine with your girlfriends, or you go and have a cup of tea with someone else, and, you're sitting there and how's such and such doing? And you're like, oh, not so great. And so you feel sometimes a sense of whakama or shame around that. And it's about positioning our mindset to see that information is actually a vehicle for the next step. Without that, we don't have a springboard to step into improvement.
Yeah.
And for us as educators too, Mel, it's a really exciting time in education in New Zealand where there could well be a system developed for a framework for early identification of our children. So we can't expect to see a difference in education for our dyslexic children if we as educators and parents are not all part of working towards advocating for a system that does actually have early identification.
Well, and it's coming back to what you're saying about it's actually having a system that starts with the understanding. It starts with, okay, what are we dealing with here? Because until you know what you're dealing with, you don't have the empathy, you don't have the understanding, and you can't actually build a path forward and an action plan because you don't actually know what the challenges are, first of all.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about dyslexia and those who have it?
There are so many. That dyslexic children learn differently is one misconception. We now know, and I know this will be controversial, but I am going to say it. All brains do learn to read in the same way to become successful readers. The science says that. So that is one misconception. One misconception are things like our children will write letters backwards. That is actually not the case. It's that is actually a hangover from how we used to write in a mirroring way years and years and years and thousands of years ago. Another misconception is that our children will just all of a sudden click, like so many times we hear, oh, he'll be okay. Oh, he'll get it or she'll get it.
It'll fall into place.
It'll fall into place eventually. Well, I kid you not, that will not happen.
Right, unless you have the proper interventions.
Yeah, that will not happen for a child who has a dyslexic profile, and particularly for a child who is severely dyslexic. Yeah.
Casey, do you think there is a stigma around it that still exists? Or have you seen that for your daughter? Do you see that for other children at the school?
It's an interesting thing because over time, and especially when you are somebody or a parent of somebody that has dyslexia or dysgraphia or ADHD, you are so focused on the barriers and challenges that you'll face that you feel like everybody is observing, and there's this guilt or this concern or worry that consumes you because you are in it. You are amongst it and you feel it for your small human that is going through it. I think over time there is so much more awareness of what learning can look like and those challenges can look like for children. So I think, again, more awareness, more understanding, more empathy. The more we are on this journey as a country, more conversations are happening, which makes that. But I don't want to take away from those students that are faced with that and actually the complexity and the challenge that they have faced in everyday life, not just even the classroom. Actually, when they go for some kids, when they're catching the bus with their friends and the challenge of not being able to read where they're going. And yes, people can have empathy, but they're still faced with those challenges. They go to a restaurant and the menu is hard to unpack. Like, everyday life for people with dyslexia, there are things that when you don't have it, you don't realise is so much harder and so much more work to put forward to be able to be part of.
Yeah. Another really important misconception that we're all aware of is that being dyslexic does not mean that you have a low IQ. That is, that is something that we need to get really, really clear on. It used to be that you may not have received a dyslexia diagnosis if you did have a low IQ. There are people who are incredibly intelligent who present with dyslexia, and there are people with lower intelligence who present with dyslexia. We really need to challenge ourselves around pigeonholing people into, intelligence levels or capabilities. We are talking about a form of neurodiversity that limits our opportunities to access the workforce, because literacy is everywhere. It is the heart and soul of living.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
You go to the doctor and you've got to fill in a form. You go to the dentist and you have to fill in a form. You go to sit your license and you have to fill in a form. There is so much written language that we are exposed to in everyday life. And I think, another misconception, Mal, is that AI or technology is going to help that.
Yeah.
That is, if you are thinking about that as a mechanism for support going forward, as a mother of a now 23-year-old dyslexic person, you're dreaming.
Right.
It is not going to be the answer.
It's an interesting thing, because when we talk about technology, and technology is often talked about as great tools, and there are some great tools, but every tool also needs to be explicitly taught.
Yeah.
And so when you're thinking about tools being used and used in the classroom as well, for my daughter actually getting onto that laptop and having to put in a password, that's tricky. That in itself is a complex task that she is faced with. Once she's on there and we have explicitly taught, we have gone through this process, we have done it over and over again, we have visuals to be able to help. It's the cognitive load for her to even get onto that is massive. There needs to be explicitly taught to be able to get through those steps and be able to access some of those tools as well.
Just thinking about what you were saying about, the barriers to the workforce because of the access to literacy, the need to be literate. I think there's an interesting stat about, 1 in 4 entrepreneurs have dyslexia, and I think part of that is probably the positives in the way in which dyslexic brains think, but also the fact that potentially they are in positions where they have to go, I have to create something for myself here because I am there is a barrier to that particular industry or that workforce. So they're in a position where they do think, okay, wow, what creative idea can I come up with? If I can just ask on a personal level, there are probably parents listening to this who are at the beginning of their journey, or they're still in a very explorative stage, and it might be quite an emotional stage for them, and this might be quite emotional in all sorts of different ways listening to this. Your advice to those people who are in that stage right now?
So my very first and most important thing I could ever say is beware of snake oil. it is very easy when you are in that emotional state and you are looking for a solution, you're looking for that action to make a difference, to be falling into a trap of pseudoscience, a program, an approach, something that looks glossy, sounds like it's really going to make a difference, but actually when you do your research does not align with what the likes of the International Dyslexia Association would say is best practice for supporting our children who are struggling readers or struggling with literacy in some way. They don't even need to at this point in time have a dyslexia diagnosis, Mel. So I really encourage parents to just stop in their tracks for a moment. I can say this because I was that parent that fell into that snake oil trap over and over. And, to be honest, I was a school principal, Mel, who fell into that trap of snake oil a few times as well. When you know better, only then can you do better.
Yeah.
So, be wary. There is a lot of stuff out there that is saying that it is evidence-based, but is it really evidence-based?
Well, it's important with everything online that you always look for those sources, back it up, do extra reading. Casey?
Can you ask me the question?
Yeah, sure. Your advice to a family who might be in a stage where they're just kind of realizing the symptoms and signs of dyslexia now.
Along with what Carla said, is do your research. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is. If it looks like it's a quick fix, it's probably not going to give you the outcome that you're wanting to have. And I guess as well, from the parent perspective, is we need to get our children through this with confidence and still feel really proud. Sorry.
No, you're okay. It is
because having dyslexia doesn't come down to their IQ, and they should feel proud of the things that they are really good at. And not only do we need to focus on getting them through, because we need our kids to be able to read and write, to be and have opportunities open for them. But we also need them to work on those strengths and getting that balance right. That's tricky. That's a tricky balance to be able to get right. And something over our time. Sorry.
No, please don't apologize.
And being the educator as well, I know those extra hits are going to help. I know doing what's happening in the class and what's happening in intervention for her and me giving her those little doses at home, it's going to work. But I also know I have to build her confidence. And so what we now have got to the point is we sort of focus on what we call the 3 C's. So what concept is she learning? We focus on that. What does that look like in spelling, reading and writing? We hit that. What content does she need? And so we know what inquiry or topic they're focusing on, and we front load information, facts, vocab. We read to her everything that she could be hit with. So when she is in that class, she has some background knowledge that she can apply it to. And when she's hit with text she doesn't know, and that decoding part is massive, she still has a bit of that cognitive load. She can apply some in.
Yeah.
So we do that. And then connection. What does she need to be an 8-year-old girl and still feel connected with her friends without feeling like she can't? And a great example would be, a bunch of her friends are all reading the same novel. She can't read that. So what do? We read that. Yeah. That is our thing. So when they're talking about Dog Man at lunchtime, she can connect with everybody. She's not on the out of that. It's being able to make sure that we are one step ahead to be able to make sure that those connections she is able to have at every stop. We just recently had My daughter is very articulate. She loves to present. She loves to put on a show, and it is one of her areas that she shines in. And she recently got asked to present in the school assembly introducing for Chinese Language Week. And we got this script, which was a whole page long. And she was like, oh my gosh, Mum, I'm going to be in front of 650 kids. And I said, yes, you are, babe. She went to bed and I said to my husband, Hayden, holy shit, how are we going to get her to learn this? Because this is massive.
Yeah.
But her confidence of, I've got this. And I'm like, yes, you do. The moment she goes, we have to put something in place. So we rewrote the speech. So it was more focused on what she could. We then spent 3 weeks every night learning this speech to the point where she had it memorized. We have to do those things so she feels great when she presents. Yeah. We have to put those things in place. And when she got to assembly to do her presentation, my husband came too just to watch. We were cheering her on, and we were probably 10 times more nervous than what she was. But this is the mind of an 8-year-old that is faced with these challenges. And she goes, Mum, we just had a practice. And I said, awesome. Were you feeling good about it? She goes, yeah, but everyone's reading and I'm not. And I said, yeah, what's the issue? Like, we've done this for 3 weeks, babe, every night. Like, and she goes, everyone's going to know I can't read because I've memorized it. And I said, and is that worrying for you? Yeah, because everyone's going to know. And I said, right, well, I guess we've got 2 options that you can choose from. You either read it, memorize it, just speak it out loud, or you hold a piece of paper so it looks like you're reading. I said, what feels good for you? And she goes, I want to hold the piece of paper like everyone else. Yeah. Perfect. Do it. We've got to coach our kids to actually, if looking like everybody else is what you need, then let's work out strategies to make sure that you are feeling like that. Yeah. And will she want to look like everyone else in 5 years' time? Probably not. But the stage that she is currently in is actually being like everyone else is so important. So it's trying to get that balance right of actually what concept spelling rules, what content and vocab does she need, and how we front load that. And then how do we make those connections so she can be successful and feel successful using her strengths while also guiding her.
I love that story. And thank you for sharing. I know this is an emotional topic for both of you to talk about and remain so. And I think it's telling that you're both in a position where you know what to do and you know what helps your children, and it is still emotional. And I think that's important for families to know too, that
and it's still hard. It's still hard. And it's still hard when they have left school. Yeah. You know, I think that is another thing that I'd like parents to know, Mel, not to freak them out. But the more we can build those capabilities and those coaching techniques that you were referring to, Casey, and realise that dyslexia is a lifelong condition. Dyslexia there is no cure for dyslexia. We can't cure it. And how dyslexia presents through our lifespan whilst we're at school and when we leave school might be slightly different. And we as parents have to be up for and ready for that ride for the whole way. It is challenging, but gosh, it is a privilege, and it's rewarding. What you learn and how you develop yourself as a parent is just, I would never change that for the world. I'm so grateful for the sleepless nights, the worry, the gazillions of videos that I've watched. And, you know, I remember when William was diagnosed and I drove from Auckland back to the Coromandel, and I stayed up till 3 a.m. researching options, searching for that action prematurely. But, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And everybody can do this and make a difference.
Can we just finish finally on the positives of dyslexic thinking? Because there are positives, and what you would leave, I guess, for a family to say that this is actually...
There are so many, like you say, and it is really coming back to sort of what Casey touched on and what I mentioned earlier about parents know their children best. This is not all doom and gloom. We are talking about the literacy side of things if we isolate to dyslexia. Our son, just like you were saying about your little dot, boy, can he hold the floor. And so, it really is, I think, dyslexic people have many, many different strengths. It's about helping them to identify their strengths, celebrating those strengths, and really putting as much time and effort into building their capability in those areas. If they have particular strengths in music or art or public speaking or sport or whatever it is, find that thing and make sure that you place as much, if not more, emphasis and time on that strength. It is very, very easy as a parent to focus on just the intervention piece. And we have to remember that what you focus on expands. So if we are just focusing on that intervention in isolation, that will expand. And what underlying message are we giving our children if we just focus in that area?
Yeah. And because then that comes back to the confidence piece too, right? That you need to make them feel just as successful as rather than I'm needing to work harder on this.
Yeah, be you dyslexic or not, everybody has strengths and everybody has challenges, right? Yeah. The difference is that actually for a dyslexic child or a dyslexic adult, your challenge is labelled, your challenge is tagged to being a literacy challenge.
Yeah.
Other people's challenges will sit elsewhere.
Casey, positives of dyslexic thinking to leave people with?
Just like Carla mentioned, there are just too many to mention. But from a parent perspective and a teacher perspective, is really honing in on what those strengths are for those individual kids and making sure that is celebrated and at the forefront of what they do, and also really celebrating and making sure that they know that they have something to bring to the table in everything that they do. And whether that is they are great at speaking, for whether that's creative, it's giving them the skills to be able to find people with different strengths and teaming up with them, because actually working in a team is something that what we do in our careers, it's what we do in the workforce, it's what we do in sports teams. Actually being able to identify other people's strengths and working in partnership so everyone gets better, I think allows everyone to shine in their own way.
Well, thank you to you both for bringing your perspectives as parents, as educators, as mums. I really appreciate the insights that you've given us about, finding out and doing your research. Having an understanding before you spring into action, and celebrating those strengths as well. I think there's a lot of families that will feel better off after listening to this discussion. So I appreciate you sharing.
Thank Mel.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. If that topic was helpful for you and you'd like to hear more, please do like and subscribe. It sends me that feedback. School Shorts is all about supporting busy parents who want their children to thrive. Follow on social at School Shorts NZ for fun ideas, helpful resources, and exclusive giveaways.